Welcome back to WagerTalk.com. I'm Marco D'Angelo, joined in studio with Bryan Leonard, and we're going to discuss days of the week, Bryan, and do they mean anything in betting daily sports? We talk about baseball, basketball, and the one that I really focus in more on days of the week is baseball, because baseball is a sport that they play just about every day. You know, there's very few days off for teams, so it's a bigger factor, travel and everything else. And I found that there's certain days that I look at a little bit differently. I'm more hesitant to lay a big favorite on a Monday or a Tuesday than I am on a weekend game. It just seems to me that teams aren't always going to have the same focus. You know, you're just coming off a big weekend. You're traveling on a Monday or a Tuesday. Sometimes you get the Monday off for a travel day, so then you pick up a Tuesday off of a day off. And you just don't see teams all the time perform at that. They're not machines, is basically what I'm trying to say. And I think the better teams, if they're going to take a day off mentally, it's going to be one of those days earlier in the week as opposed to later in the week where you got bigger crowds.
The crowds is really, I think, where it comes down to. You find a team that plays to a big crowd. You know, Pittsburgh all the time now, they sell out a lot of their games. They go on the road and they play in Milwaukee or something where they're not getting a lot of crowds. And if it's on a Monday or Tuesday, you know, I've heard players in the past, because being from Cleveland, you know, old Municipal Stadium, people would go in there and there's no crowds at all. Right. So you're all of a sudden you're a Yankee, you come into Cleveland Stadium, it just really throws you off.
Yeah, and you talked about Pittsburgh, and you know, years ago before the Pirates, they've gotten good in the last 3 years. But before that, it had been a long drought in Pittsburgh, and there were some very sparse crowds in Pittsburgh. But our buddy Gil Alexander, I used to do podcasts with Gil all the time, and I said on one of his podcasts that, you know, this is just a blind play with Pittsburgh. Play them at home on Saturday, especially if it's a night game. When the Pirates weren't good, they were still a 60% play over the last few years before they got good on Saturdays. And the reason for that was they didn't get crowds, but on Saturdays they did, because that's when they had all of the giveaways. Mm-hmm. They had fireworks night, a concert after the game, bobblehead night, whatever it was. You got your biggest crowds on Saturday, and it seemed like the Pirates played to the crowd. They weren't used to having, you know, people in attendance, and they wanted to go out there and win those games and, you know, win the fans back in Pittsburgh. So those are things that I do look at. Look at teams, you know, it was so funny. This is something that, you know, you and I, we've never played professional sports, but we try to think like the athletes.
You try to, yeah.
And I was watching, you know, horse racing, surprise that, but TVG, they have one of their analysts on there now is a former baseball player, Paul Deluca. And they were talking about a jockey that had a mount in every single race on the card that day at Gulfstream. You know, and he goes, it was the final race of the day, and the other analyst goes to Paul and he goes, you know, do you think he's really going to be, you know, up for this race? Because it was a claiming race, which is the lowest class, you know, of horses. And he goes, well, you know, he's had a big day. He's got a lot, you know, he's had some wins and everything. He's rode some, you know, some big races. But, you know, I can say from my standpoint as an athlete, when I used to go, and he kind of ragged on my Pirates, but this was when Paul Deluca played, the Pirates were bad. Mm-hmm. He says, you know, you don't have the same intensity going into the ballpark on a Tuesday night in Pittsburgh that you do on a Friday or a Saturday night at home playing the San Francisco Giants. It's human nature. And to hear an athlete admit that, you know, I've always said with a lot of our situational stuff that they're human beings just like you and me. You know, we put them on pedestals because they're athletes. But, you know, hey, they have bad days. They mail it in at the office. You know, guys that work wherever your job is, you don't give 110% every single day out there. And that's why I do look for situational stuff, and that's one of them. Are there any other days of the week that you have stuff on?
Well, it used to be on Sundays, you'd see a lot of teams play their lesser players, and the games would go under. It's a nice under situation. But I found lately a lot of the teams are doing that on Saturday. You're playing a late game on Friday night, and then on Saturday you have the day game normally. Mm-hmm. And they're just resting them on Saturday. You know, Harper was rested today. This is a Wednesday, but he's in a slump. He's not pitching. He's not playing very well. So they're more willing. Back in the olden days, unless you were injured, you played every day. Now it's a long season, and maybe they're doing the opposite of the Golden State Warriors, and they're trying to give everybody a time off. But keep in mind, those Saturday games also are games that they're not going to be playing all their starters.
Anytime you have a team playing a night game followed by a day game, I would advise people wait to look to see the lineups, because that's where you're going to see the biggest movements from stuff. And I'm just going to throw one out there, a trend that's been the last 3 Tuesdays in a row. We've had, now obviously there's been a lot of good pitchers that have had good games on Tuesdays too. But going back the last 3 weeks, Drew Smiley on May 10th on Tuesday night. Drew Smiley was pitching lights out. I mean, for going back to last season, the last 15 so starts, he gives up on a Tuesday night, goes 5 innings, gives up 2 dingers, 6 runs, his worst outing in 2 years. It happened on a Tuesday.
I had him in that game, by the way.
I did too. And that's why I'm bringing it up. And the following Tuesday, we had Marcus Stroman, who had been pitching solid baseball. He was going out, giving up 2 runs a game, on average, solid. He gives up 7 runs in 5 2/3 innings. And then last night, Chris Sale, probably one of the best pitchers in baseball this season so far. He's just been dominant. He goes out last night, 6 runs in 3 1/3 innings. That just saying there is stuff the days of the week, I feel.
I will say, being a Cleveland Indians fan, the Indians have always hit Sale well. I don't think earlier this year they had, but he's had trouble against Cleveland. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's certain times where the guys just don't have it. You would think when they're playing for first place with Chicago and Cleveland, you'd bring it anyway. But it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah, anytime, a lot of times I'll send out a tweet about a record of teams on certain days of the week, and the Twitter trolls love to bash whatever you send out, but it's like there's something to it, guys.
Well, Sacramento Kings on Tuesdays.
Yeah. Back in the day,
we've talked to a lot of nice people from Sacramento in that area.
Yeah.
I hate to say anything, but Tuesdays there's not much going on in Sacramento, and Sacramento took advantage of that for years.
Yep, absolutely. We've talked about in football teams after, going to Hawaii and stuff, a lot of times, whenever they come back from Hawaii, or, they're not focused for the game in Hawaii.
Or they're going to London in the NFL.
Absolutely.
I mean, we talked about that, teams on the way to London.
Scheduling stuff, all of that stuff, just keep adding stuff to your arsenal, guys. Never, don't just dismiss something, say, because it doesn't seem like it makes sense. Dig a little deeper. You'll find some reasoning behind it. All right, guys. Hey, check it out. Every Tuesday at WagerTalk, for $2, you're going to get a best bet from one of our cappers. We pick a different capper each week and offer his best bet for just $2. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk or to a new capper. Also, guys, if you're new to WagerTalk, after your first purchase of $12 or more, if you email support@WagerTalk and you put your username in there, we'll put a $50 sign-up bonus in your account within 24 hours. That's our way of saying thank you and welcoming you to WagerTalk. You can use that $50 to spend on the site any way you want. That's it for this week with the videos. Thanks for Bryan Leonard coming in once again, and I'll be back with you next week. Marco D'Angelo. Enjoy the games this week and cash a lot of tickets. We'll talk to you next week.